Let's dip into the next topic. I would like to invite our next esteemed speaker, Dr. Gaurav Sharma, sir. He is professor in the SMS Medical College, Jaipur, with a special focus on chronic pain interventions and cancer pains. Has been at the forefront of advancing pain medicine, has contributions including 26 publications, 6 book chapters, and prestigious honors like Pain Ambassador of the Year Award 2019 and Chikitsa Ratna Award IMA 2013. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. So my topic is stellate ganglion interventions. It is not visible, huh? So stellate ganglion is one of the earliest intervention which is a pain physician learned and doing the starting practice. So it's a very, you can say it's a easier intervention. Previously when we started the practice, we used to do it by the landmark guided technique, and then C-arm fluoro guided, and now the USG guided. There are 3 approaches. Yes, now it is there. Thank you. So it's a sympathetic plexus block, sympathetic plexus intervention, which is cervicothoracic ganglion fuses with the first thoracic, so that is called star-shaped. That's why it's known as stellate ganglion. It started and it has been published in 1923 by Salem and the Cappies, and in 1924 Brooms and the Mendels. And so it's a very old procedure which is being practiced even in anesthesia, regional anesthesia, and now on the pain. So anatomy wise, I already told it's a fusion of C7 and T1. At the level of C7 and T1, in front of first rib it's found, and it's around 2.5 centimeter long, 1 centimeter wide, and 0.5 centimeter thick ganglion. So we all know that the sympathetic ganglions, they are moving around carotid arteries. So preganglion fibers from the interlateral horn of the spinal cord, and the supplies which caters is the T1 to T2 and upper limb T2 to T9. They are all used to go through this sympathetic chain at the level of stellate ganglion. So that's why it's a major relay center for the head and neck and the upper limb. So anatomy wise, we should know what are the structures in the vicinity. So medially is an important thing: prevertebral fascia and the vertebral body, esophagus, thoracic duct, and longus, colli, and anterior scalene muscles. It's just in the posterior and the lateral and the brachial plexus sheath and the neck of the first rib. This is the important thing. And another important relation is vertebral artery. So vertebral artery traverses over the stellate ganglion and enters the vertebral foramen, and it is located posterior to the anterior tubercle of the C6. So whenever we are going to the initially like the landmark technique or in the USD technique, C6 chest neck tubercle is the very prominent tubercle. So it is a, you can say, safety also, because the vertebral artery usually goes behind that. But there is a lot of anatomical variation whenever we are going in the USG and or cadaveric study. That has been found. It may or may not follow these rules, but general rule is the C6 tubercle is anterior to the vertebral artery. The nerve roots of brachial plexus C6, C7, C8, T1 lie posterior to the respective tubercle. This is the important landmark. So indication wise, stellate ganglion intervention has been used in various pain syndromes as well as vascular insufficiency. So pain syndrome is CRPS I, CRPS II, vascular headaches, acute herpes zoster, PHN, phantom limb pain, Paget's disease, CA, various CA cases that involves the head and neck or upper limb. Post-radiation neuritis, intractable angina pectoris. This is also an important thing when the medication management and all other things are not relieving the chest pain or angina. So that is also a good indication. Diabetic neuropathy and pain from cranial nerve disorders like Bell's palsy is associated with this facial pain. Then you can try this stellate ganglion intervention. And in vascular insufficiency, to increase the blood flow, in the periphery. You can, like in Raynaud's disease phenomenon, frostbite, vasospasm, occlusive vascular disease, or scleroderma, you can use this intervention. And hyperhidrosis, where the sweating is quite high, so you can use this block or use intervention successfully. There are a few contraindications, like all procedures. And mechanism of action, how it works, it blocks the sympathetic outflow, and due to the vasodilation, blood flow is improved, and pain modulation is can also worked with the central and peripheral pathways. So I have already explained that there are three major type of techniques. One is blind, which is not advocated now. Another is fluoroscopic guided, and then USG guided. So USG guided is or the hybrid technique is the best, because you can see all the soft tissue structures with this. Dye spread can be seen with the C-arm, that has the advantage. So it's important how you learn, how you practice. My practice is basically fluoroscopy guided. Whenever the USG procedures has been done, I used to take help of my fellow colleagues. So equipment wise, first, whenever you are going for the procedures, you should go for the diagnostic intervention, followed by the therapeutic intervention. Diagnostic and therapeutic, they may need the separate things. Diagnostic, you need preservative-free local anesthetic, needle 22 to 25 gauge, 5 to 10 centimeter needle you can use, and there should be always, there has to be some image guidance. Either it can be fluoroscopy, it can be USG, and the resuscitation equipment has to be always ready, and you should have the whole facility if any complication arises. Informed consent, IV access, monitoring, emergency drugs, these are the preparation pies. Positioning head, little bit of head extension and with the head fixation. In USG, there might be some tilting on the one side might be needed. So landmark, I will not discuss. The fluoroscopy guided, mainly there are three type of approaches. It can be at the level of C6 or C7. There are the two approaches, paravertebral and anterior approach. Another is the oblique approach, and third is the RF techniques. So in fluoroscopy, we should know the fluoroscopic anatomy, level identification at the level of C6, C7. Anterior approach, there has to be, entry point is at the junction of the vertebral body and the transverse process. So you have to check the dye spread in the AP, oblique and lateral. Dye spread has to be linear dye spread. There should not be any vascular uptake. It can be venous, it can be arterial. So this is important thing. Then there might be chances of seepage into the epidural space. So these things has to be taken in your mind. Now comes the modified approach, is called oblique or lateral approach. You should know where the uncyanotic process, you can see the uncyanotic process, and just below the uncyanotic process the entry point, and you have to take hit the bone and just little bit of withdraw, and then the dye spread is coming like this. So this is oblique approach. So you should little bit of differentiate between the longus colli spread and the sympathetic spread. So again, the confirmation has to be done in all views, AP, oblique and lateral. Then RF ablation, another techniques, and RF ablation has to be done unilateral at the level of 3 level identification has to be done. This you can see either right side or left side at the desired level. 5 mm active tip is required, and you can use 5 centimeter or 10 centimeter according to your comfort zone. Stimulation has to be done, sensory and motor stimulation. Important thing is you have to rule out phrenic nerve and recurrent laryngeal nerve stimulation. There should be no motor stimulation, and you have to be very, you can say you should tell the patient before the procedure that what is needed, because the cooperation during the procedure has to be there. So patient, you can see the recurrent laryngeal nerve involvement, and the patient has to make the sound, and patient should not move the neck, and these are the important things and how you should proceed. Lesioning can be done for the 70 degrees centigrade for 60 seconds. Then comes the ultrasound guided techniques. So ultrasound is, the anatomy is the same. You should be thoroughly prepared for the manipulation. So visualization of the carotid, vertebral artery, thyroid, esophagus and all the longus colli, this has to be done. So how you get the successful intervention. So the signs of successful intervention are, they are venodilation, vasodilation, so visible engorgement of the vein, diminution of the psychogalvanic reflex, then there is temperature increase on the local area, and the Horner syndrome. So Horner syndrome is a sign of successful, but if you are giving the repeated procedures, then it might not that common. So what are the signs and symptoms of Horner syndrome? The ptosis, meiosis, anhidrosis, anophthalmos, and loss of ciliospinal reflex and conjunctival congestion. Now comes the complication part. It seems to be very rapid, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes procedures, but the complications are little bit, you should be aware what can be done. It may be due to their faulty position, it may be due to your faulty spread, it may be due to the infection. So there are the different things. So anatomy is very important. If you are giving the intravascular, it may lead to the seizures and cardiac arrest. So whenever you are giving the drug, it has to be preservative free. That is the important thing. The preservative free, lignocaine, bupivacaine, ropivacaine, whatever you are using, that has to be preservative free. If you are using steroid for the diagnostic or some therapeutic procedure, it has to be non-particulate steroids. Then hoarseness can be a common occurrence because the drug has spread to the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Phrenic nerve blocks of the unilateral, that might be some difficulty in the senses or in the perception of the respiration, because the opposite side is working normally, but the patient may say that, yeah, I am feeling difficulty in respiration, though might be saturation is not affected, but the feeling of losing the respiratory feedback by the muscles, it is cumbersome in some patient, in anxious patient especially. And the lungs is in vicinity, so pneumothorax, esophageal puncture, and vascular injury may be there. So I have already covered this, yes, this is neuraxial and brachial plexus spread, because the dural sheath is in continuity with this. If you are doing the more local anesthetic, more volume of the drug, there might be some this, and if your positioning is displaced, then it might lead to the epidural or intrathecal block. So that may lead to total paralysis. So the resuscitation equipment has to be ready. And if brachial plexus anesthesia, then you should be aware how to deal with. Infection can occur if you are not using, as Pankaj told in the previous lecture or in the disc, because he was using the different of sets. So this is important. Soft tissue may lead to the abscess. Neuraxial infection may lead to the meningitis, and the bone infection can osteoarthritis. These all are reported. These are because it's a very old intervention which is being in practice in the pain practice. So these all are the lot of cases has been reported. So evidence wise, there are different evidence published by the various guidelines, various societies. The most commonly, maximum best evidence, level 1 evidence is in CRPS. So CRPS of upper limb, stellate ganglion intervention has been very positive. Ischemic and autonomic dysfunction, yes, it's a mixed bag of evidence. You cannot say that it is very much recommended, but it can be tried definitely with the all consent, and plus and minus has to be explained. So in conclusion, stellate ganglion intervention is safe and effective if done with the proper technique and imaging guidance. We should be aware what are the common complications and common consequences can occur. So it has been widely used in pain medicine and vascular insufficiency. So we have to be equipped to handle all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma, for your wonderful presentation. Just there is time, that's why I am asking you, which level do you prefer? Are they C6 or C7?
Sir, in my personal opinion, I used to practice at C7 because I used to do at the fluoroscopic
Guidance.
Yeah. But in blind as well as USG guided, C6 is preferable.
C6.
So it's based on own practice and own comfort zone.
Have you faced any complications while doing the C7 level?
Complication per se, if you are talking about, then not very frequently. Only in last 15 years, I have only 1 or 2 episodes of hypotension, especially that can be easily managed. Horner's is a very common occurrence. We will not say that it is a complication. It is rather sequelae to this.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful speech. You have managed to treat our confusion better than any intervention could have. Thank you so much, sir. Now let's move on to our next topic. I would like